A story of tragedy and lessons. The gruesome tale of Judges 1921. Among the narratives of the Old Testament, one stands out not only for its brutality, but also for its chilling relevance to the consequences of moral decay and the absence of accountability. This story, found in Judges 1921, is perhaps one of the most unsettling in the Bible. Before diving in, understand that this account delves into themes of violence, betrayal, and human depravity, offering profound lessons that resonate even today. Setting the stage, the tale begins with a simple yet ominous statement. In those days, there was no king in Israel. This declaration, repeated throughout the book of Judges, serves as a grim reminder of the anarchy and moral relativism that dominated the era. Without centralized leadership or consistent enforcement of God's laws, the Israelites often strayed, doing what was right in their own eyes. Here, the focus shifts to a Levite, a member of the priestly tribe, tasked with upholding God's covenant. He resides in the remote hill country of Ephraim, far removed from the southern city of Bethlehem, where he acquires a concubine. This relationship is complex. While concubinage was culturally accepted, it often signified a secondary or subordinate marital arrangement, fraught with its own societal tensions, betrayal, and reconciliation. The concubine proves unfaithful, leaving the Levite and returning to her father's house in Bethlehem. For 4 months, she remains there, and the Levite, perhaps out of love, duty, or societal obligation, sets out to retrieve her. His journey from the northern hills to Bethlehem is not just a physical one, but a prelude to the moral descent that will soon unfold. Upon reaching her father's house, the Levite is met with unusual hospitality. The woman's father lavishes attention on him, convincing him to stay for several days, despite his initial intent to return quickly. This delay, though seemingly trivial, becomes pivotal as it sets the stage for the horrors to come. Finally, the Levite insists on leaving, and with his concubine and servant, begins the journey back to Ephraim. Arrival in Gibeah. As night falls, the group nears Jebus, later known as Jerusalem. The Levite refuses to stay in this non-Israelite city, preferring instead to continue to Gibeah, a town of Benjamin. However, Gibeah proves inhospitable. No one offers them shelter, an egregious breach of the cultural norms of hospitality that were highly valued in ancient Israel. Eventually, an elderly man returning from work in the fields notices the travelers in the town square. Appalled by the lack of hospitality, he invites them into his home, ensuring they have a place to rest. The Levite reassures him that they are self-sufficient, needing only a roof over their heads. The night of horror. As the group settles in, their respite is shattered by the arrival of men from Gibeah. These sons of Belial, a term indicating wickedness and depravity, surround the house and demand that the Levite be handed over to them to satisfy their lust. The elderly host pleads with them, begging them not to commit such an atrocity. His counter-offer to give them his virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine instead reveals a twisted prioritization of male honor over female dignity. While abhorrent, this response reflects the deeply patriarchal and often brutal societal norms of the time. The men refuse to listen. In desperation, the Levite forces his concubine outside. What follows is a night of unspeakable violence. The men of Gibeah abuse her until morning, leaving her lifeless at the doorstep. A gruesome call to justice. At dawn, the Levite finds his concubine collapsed at the threshold. Showing no compassion, he coldly commands her to get up, only to realize she is dead. Without ceremony, he places her body on his donkey and returns home. What happens next is both shocking and strategic. The Levite dismembers her body into 12 pieces, sending one to each tribe of Israel. This gruesome act serves as a summons, a visceral call to arms demanding justice for the atrocity committed by the men of Gibeah. The nation is horrified. Never before had such a crime occurred in Israel's history. Civil war. The tribes of Israel gather to address the crime, demanding that the Benjamites surrender the guilty men of Gibeah. The tribe of Benjamin refuses, choosing instead to protect their own. This defiance leads to a civil war. The conflict is devastating. The combined forces of the 11 tribes nearly annihilate Benjamin. Tens of thousands die on both sides, and by the war's end, only 600 Benjamite men remain, hiding in the wilderness. In the aftermath, The aftermath of the war brings a new dilemma. The tribes, bound by an oath not to give their daughters in marriage to the Benjamites, face the potential extinction of an entire tribe. To resolve this, they resort to further violence and manipulation. First, they attack Jabesh Gilead, a town that failed to join the fight, killing its inhabitants and sparing only 400 virgins to be given as wives to the Benjamites. Yet, this still leaves 200 men without spouses. In a final, morally dubious act, the Israelites allow the Benjamites to abduct women during a festival at Shiloh, circumventing their oath while perpetuating the cycle of violence and exploitation. Lessons from the darkness. This harrowing narrative offers profound lessons. The need for accountability. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Without leadership and accountability, moral chaos reigns. This story underscores the importance of governance and spiritual oversight in preventing societal collapse. Every life has value. The dehumanization of the concubine and the subsequent actions highlight the dangers of treating individuals as expendable. Recognizing the image of God in every person is essential to a just and compassionate society. Drifting from God leads to ruin. The events of Judges 19:21 are the culmination of Israel's spiritual decline. When a nation turns from God, it becomes vulnerable to corruption and self-destruction. Consequences are inevitable. While God is merciful, our actions carry consequences. The civil war, loss of life, and moral compromises show how one sin can spiral into greater calamities. God's grace amid human failure. Despite the darkness, God's grace is evident. The tribe of Benjamin is spared from extinction, and Israel eventually rebuilds. This reminds us that redemption is possible, even in the face of overwhelming sin. A final reflection. The book of Judges ends with a haunting refrain. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. This story is a stark reminder of the perils of moral relativism and the vital need for God's guidance. While this account is deeply unsettling, it serves as a call to self-reflection. How do we treat others? Are we accountable in our actions? Do we prioritize God's will in our lives? In the darkness of Judges, we see a reflection of humanity's capacity for both depravity and redemption. Let this story inspire us to seek God, uphold justice, and value every life as sacred.